Hello, Algebra 2. This is 11.3, Basic Identities. Now, we're not going to do any of the verifying identities or the sum and difference identities. We're not going to do 11.4 and 11.5. I just want to do the basics. You're going to have trig next year, so you should be able to do this. But I do want you to be able to substitute in and do what they ask. So they ask you to simplify in this. So what they want is to change this to a simple expression. What you do is you plug in the identities. Here's your identities. Your cosecant is 1 over the sine. Your secant is 1 over the cosine. Tangent, sine over the cosine. Cotangent, cosine over the sine. Your Pythagorean identities are the sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta is 1. Then if I divide them all by sine squared, I get this expression. 1 plus cotangent squared equals cosecant squared. And if I divide them all by cosine squared, I get tangent squared plus 1 equals secant squared. So these are what are called your identities. Now these can be moved around a little. I can do sine squared equals 1 minus cosine squared. So if you see something that looks familiar, move it around and you'll see that it's actually one of these identities. So simplify. Number 1 rule, change everything to sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over the cosine times cotangent, which is cosine over the sine. And look, you can cancel top and bottom because it's being multiplied, and you end up with 1 over the sine. Well, that's not simple. 1 over the sine is the cosecant. So your answer will just be cosecant of theta. So see, all you have to do is substitute in, change everything to just plain sines and cosines, and then simplify it to its simplest form. Let's do one more. Sine squared is already in sine, cosine, and secant is 1 over the cosine. Well, if I look, cosine divided by cosine is just 1. So sine squared of theta minus 1. Well, that looks something like this. So let's see if I can rearrange. If I flip the 1 in the cosine by changing the sign, I can get sine squared of theta minus 1 equals negative cosine squared of theta. See that? I can get that by just moving the 1 to that side by subtracting and moving the cosine squared. So sine squared minus 1 equals negative cosine squared of theta. So I'd simplified it down to one expression. So that's what you're doing on this chapter.